Today, for Black History Month, we are turning our attention to a woman who made history in baseball. Toni Stone is the subject of today's doodle on Google's homepage. Stone is credited with being the first black woman to play in professional baseball in the Negro League. She played for the American Legion baseball team before moving on to the San Francisco Sea Lions, which was a white minor league team at the time. The pinnacle of her career came when she played second base for the Indianapolis Clowns, a professional Negro League team. All right, joining us now to talk about all of this, we have Monique Wray. She is a San Francisco-based illustrator and animation director who drew today's Google Doodle. Monique, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. You describe your work as character-driven with a touch of whimsy, and I know this is your second Google Doodle. You did one for Teacher Appreciation as well last year. What was going through your mind when you're trying to create and you know how many people are going to see a Google Doodle and what it should say to them?
Yeah, I really hope that people were sort of engaged with the work enough where they would click it and learn more about Toni, because Toni really is what's important here. She's such a sort of significant and impactful person. The fact that she's the first Black woman to play in the Negro Leagues and not a lot of us know about her. I think it was important that people clicked on that and learn more.
Yeah, this is an education as well as exposure and talking about this woman that is not necessarily a household name. Now, she was born in Minnesota, so St. Paul, Minnesota claims her as well, but we should say she moved to San Francisco in her early 20s with her sister, and then after she played for the Indianapolis Clowns, she retired in Oakland, and so we do have Bay Area connections deeply as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your Google Doodle, because you put her in a Clowns jersey, but you could have put her in a lot of different jerseys as well. She could have been in the Sea Lions jersey, or she could have been different. Tell me when you want people to see this. I see the male player running past her. I see the crowd. She was second base. What did you want to make sure you included in this animation?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you mentioned the Clowns, because the Clowns was kind of like a really important team for her. She wanted to be on the Clowns, even, she was at the Sea Lions and had other spots in her career, but the Clowns was really important for her. So I wanted to signify that, but also the fact that she played with other men. So I wanted to make sure that that was included in the imagery as well. So that's why we made sure to have, second baseman, a guy running across the second base to kind of highlight that.
And the filled stadium, because she was a professional and she made it big.
Yeah.
People, if you click on it too to learn more about her. I love the baseballs that fly across the screen as well. I mean, really interesting. How much research do you do before you start your doodle?
Yeah, a lot. And especially in this case, I have to be truthful and say I wasn't a big baseball fan. So I also wanted to make sure that I accurately depicted the game, right? So I did tons of research, watched 42, because that also takes place in the 1940s. I just did a deep dive on her, and she's just awesome, multifaceted woman, and
well, I love to.
Didn't care what other people thought about her, which I appreciated.
I agree with you. I mean, your Google Doodle and even Black History Month and just highlighting made me do more research as well. And I think that's the point, right? Is that we all learn.
Yeah.
And I think there is joy when you look at your art, and joy when you look at that animation. But also, I think it's important to recognize, right, how much she had to fight for it. She was a kid, who decided she loved baseball, and she was called a tomboy, but she was paid less than her teammates. And, there was a quote that said she was shunned. This was in a different article on a different publication, but they were talking about how she was shunned by her teammates, once being told, and I'm quoting here, "Go home and fix your husband some biscuits." And so when we talk about like looking at something like this as well, it's the joy and the truth behind how much she accomplished, I think.
Yeah, and the passion she had for all of it too. You mentioned she was paid less, but that wasn't something she stood for. That's part of the reason she left the Sea Lions, because she was paid less. She left to go find a job that would kind of get her at a more equivalent rate as the men that she was playing with. So, she didn't play games, which I appreciated about her, and just, had this sort of vigor and passion about her, even though she was in such a situation as not being embraced by her teammates and being a trailblazer.
Resilience is important, right?
Yeah,
resilience and
super
strength.
important for sure.
Okay, so now you've got 2 Google Doodles under your belt. I read that you had said this was maybe a bucket list, but you keep coming back to this. And what does it mean in terms of exposure for you too? Because people are clicking on it, reading about Toni Stone, but they are also hearing from you, and really, as we blaze forward, reflecting on history and making history as well.
Yeah, it's great for sure. I'm grateful to the Google Doodle team, because I think it's really important that in highlighting, history, also speaking about the now as well, and Black creatives that are existing right now, and for them to choose me to animate and illustrate her, I think is super poignant, and I'm just appreciative of them for being thoughtful in that way to have a Black woman animate a Black woman like Toni Stone. I think is really incredible.
Remarkable. And I've watched the animation again and again on a loop. Really appreciate the work. Really appreciate
that.
Really appreciate the chat this morning. Monique Wray, thanks for joining us here on Mornings on 2.
Thank you so much, Clara.